Hello, World Singers. My name is Brooke.
And I'm Tyler.
And this is
Cosmere Conversations. Well, all of you listeners, it has been a journey through time these last couple of episodes, and now we are in the final countdown. I know I said that like 6 to 8 months ago, but I think that it's actually true this time. We are less than a month to the release of Wind and Truth, coinciding, of course, with Dragonsteel Nexus in December. Obviously very excited, but we have appreciated you joining us along this, not quite a reread, but still an exploration of our different characters. And we know one of the major critiques or criticisms that we have heard is we've left out too much of what's going on with other characters.
There's a lot going on, to be fair, in these books. But this episode, we are going to look at a few of the smaller characters, the characters that are still super important to the plot, but that don't necessarily take up as many pages of the books, but still have really important stories to tell. These are people like Navani, Lift, Szeth, Adolin, all of these people who tell really integral parts of the Stormlight Archive through their stories. And a couple of these people I think are going to be super important as we go into Wind and Truth, as well as continuing forward in the Stormlight Archive.
Yeah, in the back half, a lot of these characters are rumored to be central figures. And so that's what we're going to tackle today. What that means is a bunch of stuff is going to be coming at you. A lot of information very quickly. Hope that you have once again put on your thinking caps, because we are going to go deep into the exploration of several characters. Want to give a shout out to all of our Patreons, and especially those of you who joined up recently for the raffle that is now ongoing. It's locked technically. You can no longer join the raffle, but we appreciate everyone over on Patreon.
I'm so excited for someone to get this art book.
I kind of want to insert ourselves into the raffle, but that would be cheating.
Yes.
And we are not going to put our finger on that scale. However, it is a big opportunity for one of our patrons, and I hope that they really enjoy the art piece and use it as an art piece within their own home, because it's just got so many great works by Shane Dole Green.
Absolutely. Okay, like you said, we have a lot to get through, so let's just dive in. We're going to start with the mother of machines herself, Navani Kholin. The earliest that we really know anything about Navani's life is from her time, basically when she enters the lives of Dalinar and Gavilar. She is courted by both of them. However, as we know, she ends up marrying Gavilar. Later, as she kind of reflects back on this period and the fact that she was courted by both of these brothers, she says that she truly did love both of them, but that Dalinar's intensity scared her. And so she kind of made the safe choice as a younger person. Later, she follows more of her like true heart, I think she would say, and marries Dalinar.
True heart's such an interesting idea, and the relationship between Navani and Dalinar has obviously been significant each time that I've read through the Stormlight Archive. But the addition and my focus on Gavilar this time around has really pointed out that the relationship between the three of them, this love triangle, is very complex because, of course, what you just said, Navani chooses the quote-unquote safer option, but it is also the more powerful option.
Yeah,
it is the brother that everyone expected her to choose. And she gets into a lifetime of kind of a weird situation between these two brothers that eventually turns into what we see in one of the flashbacks, like really heartbreaking scenes of a marriage that is no longer happy, and they are doing that thing where they're attacking each other in exactly the way they know that it will hurt each other the most. But one of the things that Gavilar accuses Navani of is being in love with Dalinar and choosing power for power's sake.
Yes.
I think that this is actually wrong of Gavilar. It's a quote unquote like normal assumption, but her own feeling is saying, no, Dalinar terrified me or terrified some aspect of me. I think rightfully so. We could maybe look at. And that's different than I only wanted power, and so I went with you, Gavilar.
Absolutely, absolutely. And as she says, she truly loved them both. You know, she wasn't marrying Gavilar only for gain. She loved him. And we don't really see where exactly their marriage starts to break down, but we know that before Gavilar's death, they were certainly in a very unhappy marriage. Navani is pretty bitter about the state of their relationship and kind of the things that she is doing, the role that she's playing, and Gavilar is very mentally and emotionally abusive towards her.
The night of the feast, we see Navani interrupting a meeting between Gavilar and the Herald. We know that in this moment, Gavilar has both a void light sphere and an anti-void light sphere. We will have further speculation and kind of see those things both appear later in the story, but it's in this flashback that we get our first glimpse of void light and anti-void light.
And this is Navani's first glimpse of those things as well. Then, of course, later during the feast, Gavilar is killed, and due to their kind of strained relationship, Navani is not really that upset that he's dead, which is pretty cold.
Yeah, I think it gives a more rational picture of Navani as kind of this withdrawn, maybe not like very emotional person, and kind of a queen that is going to quite literally like remove herself from the royal court and royal society that exist in Kholinar by the time we get to the Way of Kings. And like she's ostracized in some ways. And this is a criticism of her. Like she feels nothing. There's a moment when she's actually looking for the void light spheres on Gavilar's body, and she realizes that this is going to look like she's looting him, and like composes herself and presents herself, but know that what she has done is going to be interpreted by the court and going to like spread through the court. There's just so much constant stress when it comes to all of these royals and like how they're playing, not just for themselves and their own emotions, but also how it will be viewed by the guards and the ardents and everybody around the courtly atmosphere.
I mean, I think this also just tells us kind of where Navani is at mentally and emotionally by this time. Like the marriage has basically already died, you know, like she's kind of already grieved the loss of the person she used to be married to,
of course,
you know?
And so this is just like a new person that has died.
Right. Yeah. She's kind of already said goodbye to that aspect of Gavilar, the part of him that she did love at one point, which then I think makes a little bit more sense that just a few years later, she's like ready to marry Dalinar.
Yes, and just to track something that's going to appear later in her life, the anti-void light sphere that she could not find was given to Szeth as Gavilar was dying. It will eventually make its way back to Navani. But in the interim, we see the relationship between Dalinar and Navani begin to progress throughout, well, the Stormlight Archive. And we know that there is heavy cultural resistance to this relationship, as well as the discomfort. I think when we view it, it's from Dalinar's perspective, but we also have to imagine Navani is feeling similarly.
I don't think so. Navani is pretty hot to go.
Which is to her credit, because Dalinar never would have pursued the relationship in the way that needed to be done. I think it's just complex. Everything is complex. I can imagine a relationship starting up between them and both of them having doubts, like her saying, there still the thing that scared me about Dalinar in this Dalinar that I'm talking to now?
Sure, yeah.
And Dalinar saying, is this the woman who left me once going to leave me again type of thing? Like not being able to trust either of their opinions or their feelings and their emotions, their passions, to make it more about odium.
Yes. After they kind of establish their relationship, they find Orethiru, And Navani is really a key leader as they start to establish civilization in Urithiru. She organizes the tower, like where everyone is going to go, where the market's going to be, etc. She troubleshoots all of the fabrials in the tower to try to get essential things like water and sewage and heating and cooling and all of that throughout the city. And then she's also helping Dalinar reach out to the other monarchs as he is trying to form their coalition. So I think this aspect of how important Navani is, just in a super fundamental way, kind of gets glossed over. Like, I for sure forget about it when I just think about the things that Navani is up to, but incredibly important.
Yeah, I think there's the moment when Dalinar goes down in Oathbringer to his own mental struggles, and we know that Navani is stepping up in that instance.
Yes.
And it kind of appears that Dalinar was doing it, and then Navani stepped in when needed, and everyone's like, that's cool, Navani, good job. But in reality, Navani was always operating at a high caliber.
Yes.
Even long before the coalition. I'm just thinking about the fabrial inventions that allowed the archers to exist in the Words of Radiance fight. Like, she was always an integral part, not just of the economy and kind of the background things to the war. She was also essential to the war.
Yes, absolutely. It's such an example of, what is that saying? Like, behind every great man is a woman doing all the work. I don't think that's actually it, but it should be.
In this instance, Dalinar is certainly getting a lot of the credit for the establishment of the coalition that is a partnership. And I would hope now, as they are both truly equals as bondsmiths, that will not continue to happen, or has been kind of like clearly the playing field is level. But let's be honest, Navani was probably punching above Dalinar's weight class for 99.9% of their lives. And then Dalinar, during the stories that we read, like peaked and passed Navani in the one way of like, I became bondsmith first. And that's like, he got a little bit ahead at that last moment. And that's what we see. But in reality, I think Navani has been running stuff in Kholinar while everyone in Alethi society is focused on the Shattered Plains. Like, there's a whole kingdom back there.
Yeah. And even while Gavilar was king, like Navani was doing all the things. I think also important to remember for this period in Urithiru is both Navani and Dalinar they kind of always have this worry in the back of their minds about Adolin and Elokar and the expedition that they have sent away, and they haven't gotten any updates. They both have this persistent worry about their both sons and nephews. And yet, Navani kind of pushes through and is doing all the things that she needs to be doing as Dalinar kind of falls apart for many reasons, but
yes, it's during this time that Navani actually gets reports from a expedition that we see go bad in one of the interludes, and she organizes a follow-up expedition to Amia, and these events will be written down in the novella Dawnshard of Risen leveling up her Larkin, gaining a little bit more knowledge, as well as getting the Dawn Shard. But importantly, Cord also gets their shard plate at this time and brings it back for the events of Rhythm of War.
The other really important things that they find during that expedition that specifically pertain to Navani is that they make discoveries in relation to fabrials, as I believe it's Rushu tries to make a hover chair basically for Risen because Risen is disabled. They discover the use of aluminum in fabrials to isolate planes of movement, which then allows them to make the fourth bridge or the flying platforms. So this is a huge breakthrough in terms of fabrial developments. And then when they arrive in Amia, they also find a trove of soul casters. So they have those additional tools to use as they move forward.
By the time we get to Rhythm of War proper, Navani has had a year to develop that economy of Urithiru, and it is booming, even though there's a war going on and it's made trade very difficult because of Navani's leadership at the tower. There are the oath gates being used to transmit goods, and Earthu has kind of become a hub of learning and knowledge. There's like Ardents who are traveling all around to share information, some information about the Fabrials. We see that on display in the epigraphs of Rhythm of War, which are written from Navani's perspective. And during this time, she is going to be connected or get a message from a mysterious person, an unknown person, via span read. Later, we will discover that this is the sibling, that the sibling has identified Navani as the important human.
And importantly, the Fabrial experimenter, right? Because that's what the sibling is first upset about.
And that relationship is going to develop until it eventually turns into the bondsmith that we talked about.
Yeah. This is kind of all happening around the same time that Dalinar leaves the tower to go on his military expedition to Emul. And so Navani is left as the regent over Urithiru, which I think is the first time that she's really explicitly been given full power as a ruler.
Yes, I agree. I think by the time Gavilar died, Elhokar was actually old enough to take power. So there was never any like handoff between other people.
Right. Navani has done a few interviews with Szeth as he is imprisoned in the tower to ask him various questions about Gavilar's death and Szeth's various actions. And during one of these interviews, he tells her about the anti-void light gemstone that he received from Gavilar. He fetches it and gives it to her. And then Navani in turn gives it to her scholars to study. And these experiments, unfortunately, result in a devastating explosion in the tower. 3 of the scholars die, and the whole room is just destroyed.
It also further angers the sibling as like this is the thing she was kind of trying to avoid, this devastation or the destruction via Navani's experiments. Shortly thereafter, the Fuse are going to invade. Navani implements a last line of defense with the help and assistance of the sibling. This is the first moment of cooperation between the two of them.
Yes.
And so that's kind of a good transition point to mark. And it's done because she discovers a way to communicate via the lines of strata, but they're kind of veins.
It's like a quartz. It's described as
exactly
looking like garnet colored quartz that kind of runs through the walls. And to be fair, Navani does not discover this on her own. Dabid reveals it to her, but then she's able to use that to communicate with the sibling. During the invasion, Navani is detained by Rabaniel. She continues to resist the occupation in kind of covert ways, giving her scholars instructions to work on specific Fabrials. And she's also, for the first time, really doing a lot of research herself while she's communicating with the sibling and communicating with Kaladin using the strata lines.
Those experiments that she's performing intrigue Rabaniel enough to the point that they form a working relationship, and that perilous relationship will lead them to discovering or creating Warlight, the blend between Stormlight and Void Light. And with this knowledge, they will make further deductions to eventually be able to produce the very dangerous anti-Void Light.
Yeah, after this discovery, Navani realizes that Rabaniel is trying to create anti-light. And then she also realizes that the sphere she had from Gavilar was anti-light. So this kind of kickstarts this new, really impressive scholarly project for Navani. She kind of gets obsessed with this idea of creating anti-void light as a weapon. And she is eventually successful when she isolates the rhythm of odium away from the rhythms of Roshar by using a vacuum tube. Unfortunately, Rabaniel forces Navani to reveal this research, and then she uses that against the tower. Basically, she immediately begins manufacturing anti-storm light in order to kill Radiance and their Spren. And Rabaniel says that she is doing this to put an end to the war for good. She's kind of like, if we can kill all of the Radiance and their Spren, then the war can stop and I can chill for once, since I'm a fuse that's continually being resurrected.
As that climactic battle over the tower kind of crescendos, Navani is preparing Fabrials as well as the anti-void light dagger. She uses this to stab Rabaniel and negotiates a bond with the sibling after fending off Moash Vire.
Kind of daring fending off
Vire. Amid
yeah, she's doing
creating
a lot.
the bond.
Yeah.
But she is going to, through that bond, be able to restore the tower and force out all of the fused invaders. So a big come up.
What a champion.
For Navani. Always working in the background, but this was her moment to shine, and shine she did.
Absolutely. Can't wait to see what she's going to be up to in Wind and Truth.
Yeah, I'm very excited. Without getting too much into the speculation realm, I definitely want to know more about bondsmiths and the differences between Dalinar and Navani and how they're going to operate. They each have these spren, but we know that the spren are also independent thinkers and they kind of like have their own intents and purposes. And then there's very weird aspects of the Stormfather as well.
Yeah, I think especially in regards to the bondsmith spren, because there's only 3 of them and they are so unique and distinct, I am very curious about how that's going to impact how each of the bondsmiths is able to act, what powers they have, how that changes, how their powers manifest, all of this.
Another kind of combination character who with Navani, we see her combining the different forms of light. Venli is almost doing that internally within herself.
Yes.
And so let's transition over to Venli, the most dangerous singer on the planet. One of the people who is, again, going through tremendous change from when we see her at the beginning. The earliest time through flashbacks is when she's given a Void Spren gemstone by Exendwith after the humans and listeners meet up. So that's after the first meeting out in the wilds.
Correct.
Of
yeah,
the humans
on the
and
Shattered
listeners.
Plains.
Exactly. So prior to Gavilar's feast, she has this Void Spren gemstone.
And Venli is very ambitious. And she really wants to be important. She uses this Void Spren gemstone, releasing the Void Spren Ulam, and then she begins following his instructions in order to bring about the Everstorm.
We see interactions with Venli and her sister Eshonai, where there is growing conflict between the two. Eshonai seeming to be the warrior, but also the more rational one, and the one who seemingly wants to kind of like slow things down or follow traditions a little bit more. And Venli is like, no, we need to go, go, go. Keep pushing. And eventually we learn that's in part because she is being driven by Ulam. She is not only coming up with these ideas, she's being guided.
Yeah. After the Battle of Narok, the remaining listeners are eliminated and replaced by fused. Venli resists this transformation, and instead she becomes an envoy form listener.
Yeah, this is a new form that we see for Venli, a elevated honor that was bestowed upon her by Odium himself. And then that kind of recognition by Odium is going to allow Venli to continually be passed from powerful fuse to powerful fuse over the next year.
During the Battle of Narok, of course, there is a group of listeners that refuse to take war form or participate in the battle, and they flee onto the Shattered Plain, presumed dead for quite a while. That's just an important tidbit to remember because it's going to come back at the end of Venli's story here.
Now, Eshonai, at the end of her life, was actually very close to fully bonding a Radiant Spren, the Stormfather actually accepts the first ideal as her actions in death, or that she proves herself enough to the Stormfather, but she does not bond the Spren. That Spren is around when Venli is looking for Eshonai and hoping to recover her, but only finds her dead body. And it's at that moment that Venli is going to find and attract the light Spren Timber.
That light Spren starts to follow Venli, and she hides it from the fused and from the void Spren. As an envoy form, Venli becomes an ambassador to the singers who have just awoken from dull form, the former slaves of the Alethi and other people. And she has this role of telling this very carefully crafted propaganda version of her life story, basically, in order to win these singers to the side of Odium and the Fused so that they can use them as workers and soldiers, etc.
During the Battle of Thalen Field, Venli is going to say the first ideal and officially bond Timber. Timber does something interesting here, and this is the blending that I was talking about. Timber enters into Venli's gem heart, which is currently where a void Spren is living, which gives her her special form. Timber is able to either capture or restrain, somehow inhibit the void Spren while also hiding themselves within Venli's gem heart. We have not a great idea of like why this is happening or the mechanism.
It's not known to be possible really before this.
And so there's a lot of kind of speculation about what is happening. Is it right? Is it wrong? Is it the best way for things to be on Roshar? A perfect blending maybe present in Venli, but we really don't know and can't speculate too much because we have so many other characters.
Yes. Tambra has a really interesting story though, because we at least theorize based on, I think, some pretty good info that Tambra is Eiko's daughter. This is a captain of a ship in Shadesmar that we meet in Oathbringer. And Eiko's daughter is described as someone who went off chasing stupid dreams. Tambra also says that her grandfather is a Deadeye, which is why Tambra doesn't trust a bond with the humans and has instead chosen to bond a singer. First starting with Eshonai and then, of course, now Venli.
During Rhythm of War, Venli is going to become the voice to Leshwi, which is another elevation of her status. And we see that she is actually assembling a group in secret of rebels, of people who do not want to be a part of the human society or part of the fused society, but a separate third path, very similar to what her ancestors chose long ago.
Yeah, she kind of wants to build this group of like new listeners. She sees how her people are treated both by the humans, but also by the fused. The fused show up and kind of do the same thing where they're forcing the singers to work, and most normal singer people are kind of oppressed. They're servants. They don't really have freedom to choose their own destiny still, even though they're no longer under human occupation. And so Venli's goal is to carve out a space where singers can be free to have their own society and make their own rules outside of this war that's going on.
Leshwi is going to give up her servants to Rabaniel and assigns Venli the task of being a spy on Rabaniel and worries that Rabaniel is working on some type of plague that is intended to wipe out as many people as necessary to end the war.
Including singers.
Yeah. Or at least that's what happened last time, that there was a plague created by Rabaniel. So there is this mission of spying that Venli is put on, and I think it's interesting that we have two examples of spies in Shallan and Venli, and the way that their Spren react is in almost complete contrast. And it's just worthy of remembering that maybe a mission that would be perfect for Shallan is not necessarily going to be as easy for someone who is on the path of becoming a will shaper.
This is how Venli ends up at the invasion of Urithiru. She is accompanying Rabaniel. As they are occupying the tower, Venli is struggling with accepting her identity as a radiant and kind of balancing that with her really deep desire to kind of save her hide. She's a very, some might say, selfish personality. I think it's kind of understandable, the instinct to self-preserve. And so she's kind of always vacillating back and forth between stepping up and saying her ideals, really being a radiant versus kind of the person she's always been. And she doesn't really feel great about either one of those things, but she does try to start working on her will shaper skills using her surge binding while she's in the tower. At first, she is not really brave enough to truly live up to her second ideal of freeing those in bondage, but she does eventually end up freeing R'hllane from his captivity, and then she brings Lirin to the room where all of the incapacitated radiants are so that Lirin can help them.
And upon learning that Kaladin is in that unending sleep, she frees Lift, who can heal him. And while she does not admit to being a radiant, she does claim at this time to have a shard blade.
She's kind of getting little baby steps closer to fully accepting her radianthood.
In bits and pieces,
yeah.
Which, to be fair, it did happen for most of our other characters as well. So we're just kind of witnessing those early steps and kind of like playing with the power and also with the responsibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Eventually, Venli confesses to Rabaniel her deep desire to have this singer settlement outside of the humans and the fused. And Rabaniel shows her this map that shows the location of a group of listeners on the Shattered Plains. It is the only people left of Venli's family. Basically, everyone that she has known is dead other than this little group out on the Shattered Plains. She brings us to R'hllane and she confesses that she was the one responsible for bringing the Voidspren and the Everstorm in the first place. R'hllane wants to save the Radiants in the tower first and then use this map to go out and search for the remaining listeners. Venli is kind of like, I don't really care about the Radiants. I would rather just go find the family that I thought was dead. She eventually decides that she wants to bring Kaladin and his family with her as she flees from the tower, which ends up taking her back inside the tower at the moment when Kaladin is fighting Lezian, which then kind of breaks out into this larger battle in the tower.
During that final battle, Venli is going to confess to Leshwi that she is a Radiant, expecting anger and, just being attacked and killed. But Leshwi is actually overjoyed about the prospect or the now reality that the Spren have forgiven the singers enough to bond with them again. This is not something that has been seen in many desolations. We don't know the exact time that the Spren kind of completely abandoned the singers, but as the singers are the native people of Roshar, that is, they literally have part of their biology of a Gemheart meant to bond with these Spren. It would be such a devastating acknowledgement if the Spren reject you. And that is what Leshwi is kind of dealing with. All of these fused are technically dealing with.
Yeah, and we don't have a whole lot of information about this part of singer history.
Not at all.
Right.
It was mainly speculation, but I can only imagine the complex position that puts someone like Leshwi, who's trying to motivate a war-torn group of people. It's almost exactly why the humans started lying or misdirecting about being the invaders to this planet. For the singers, it's lying about still being worthy and in a righteous conflict when they don't have the Spren. Like the Spren abandoned them.
Right.
Maybe that's a sign that what they did was
Yeah, it's
wrong.
like what happened.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the humans abandoned the story of their own origin because it made them look bad, because something was wrong about it. So this is like their version, and it's now been overcome in Venli.
But this revelation leads Leshwi to say that Radiance must be protected. She completely switches sides. She joins the Radiance in the battle and fights against her own kind, fighting against other fused. She sees this as this hopeful moment that can really change the future of her people. At the end of the battle, at the end of Rhythm of War, Venli does go on her expedition out onto the Shattered Plains. She finds the last listeners, including her mother. She brings some Reacher light spren to bond these last listeners, and after bonding a Reacher, her mother, Jack Slim's mental health seems to improve. Her mother's memory has been fading for many years, and this bond seems to be helping a little bit. And then Venli is finally able to truly commit to her second ideal, and her ideal is accepted.
Notably, her ideals are accepted by cultivation, and we still don't have a perfect breakdown of when and why that happens, or like what the blend of the Spren is to kind of trigger that thing. But we have primarily seen Radiants who are swearing ideals corresponding enough to the Stormfather that he's the one who accepts them, I'm guessing on Honor's behalf.
Yeah.
Let's jump over to another one of Cultivation's favorite. This is Lift.
Oh, Lift. What a weird little girl.
Our game breaker from way back when. Lift makes no sense. She's a little bit of a Hoid in a smaller, girlish form.
A smaller, sillier package.
Exactly. An actual whimsy version of Hoid, and she's just sliding around, popping into Odium visions and whatnot whenever she sees fit. We know that she is ethnically Reshi, though she says that she's never been to the Reshi Isles. Her and her mother lived in a place called Ral Alorim, which is not known to be a great place. And
it's called the City of Shadows.
Yeah, I don't know if this involves the plague that I talked about earlier with Rabaniel, but just like, I imagine if you do dark stuff in the cognitive realm, if you spread like some type of plague in the cognitive realm, then it could waste away on a place. It could like change a place forever.
Yeah, we
honestly, don't know enough.
Yeah, we
it's
don't know
speculation.
Literally anything.
But it's a dark place, and Lift grows up as a street urchin. And so
yes, her mother dies when she's young, and then Lift becomes a street urchin. At some point, we don't really know when, it seems to be after her mother's death, but before we meet Lift, she goes to the Night Watcher and she asked not to change. Seemingly, this is kind of in relation to her mother's death, like wanting to stay the same little girl that her mother knows. And she believes that her boon was granted. She continually insists that she is only 10 years old. She believes that any number she can't count on her fingers is unlucky, and refuses to believe that she is aging or growing up. And then also at some point, she bonds Wendell, a cultivation spren, becoming an edge dancer.
Yeah, as far as we know, it's Night Watcher first and then Wendell second. Now, if she is correctly identifying her starting age when she goes to the Night Watcher as 10, then we can make a pretty good guess that this occurs around the year 1170 in the 6-month third week, and we'll just, leave it at that. But it's
very specific.
Yeah, we don't want to go into the day that she visited specifically, but that is actually the same time period that Gavinor is born, and Kaladin and Shallan would be somewhere in their early teens. Yeah, something like 12 to 14 at this time.
Yeah.
So she's younger than most of that Radiant generation.
Yes, definitely. Then Lift travels to Azir, and she takes a thieving job where she meets Gox, who ends up becoming her friend. Nail, the Herald, has been stalking her by this point. That's actually what brings her to Azir, and he has followed her to Azir. He stalks her into the palace as she's doing this thieving job, and he tries to abduct and or kill her, but she's able to escape a few times. Gox ends up being killed, but Lift uses regrowth for the first time, saying her second ideal, and is able to resurrect Gox, which appears to be a miracle and causes the ruling council of Azir to appoint Gox the emperor.
And that's going to occur during Words of Radiance, some of the interludes there, which sets up the novella Edge Dancer, when we'll pick up with Lift for her own story.
Yeah, in Edge Dancer, we see Lift traveling to Yeda to escape the Azish palace, where she feels very out of place. While she's in Yeda, she meets the Stump, this woman who runs an orphanage, and Lift also converses with an old man outside of the orphanage. At this point, Lift is still being hunted by Nail. She calls him Darkness, and she ends up tracking Nail and his cohort of squires. She eats his food. She meets Szeth for the first time. And through listening to the Skybreakers' conversations, Lift learns that there's another Surgebinder in the city.
Flashing right back to what you said, that old man turns out to be Arklo, who is a Dacian Amian.
Also known as a Sleepless.
The Stump is eventually revealed to be the other Surgebinder and one of the first known Truth Watchers, and especially the first normal
Truth Watcher.
Yeah. Nice. A normal Truth Watcher, unlike Renarin.
Yeah.
The timeline would make it, pretty comparable to Renarin's bonding. We don't know when that happened specifically.
Well, wouldn't Renarin have been bonded all the way back in Way of Kings, because he's doing
earlier than Way of Kings, but
yeah.
he at some point prior to Way of Kings or during Way of Kings, he's going to bond, and it's considered to be one of the earliest, but we also have this on display. Remember, there's basically no time passing between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer. So this is all happening within a period of a couple of months.
Yeah.
And even if you push it to before Way of Kings, it's not a period of years.
Right.
And so a lot of the Truth Watcher's friends, maybe corrupted or not, are coming out to bond different radiants.
At the end of Edge Dancer, Nail attacks the Stump and Lift. Lift says her third ideal, which is, quote, "I will listen to those who have been ignored," end quote. And she helps Nail acknowledge that the desolations have in fact begun again. The Everstorm and the Voidbringers are here, and it's kind of pointless for him to be trying to kill Radiance at this point.
And that works. I mean, he changes 180 kind of drastically, decides to kind of officially reform the Skybreakers.
Well, the Skybreakers never went away.
Well, they never went away, but he is
just
kind of
brings them into the light.
Yes, exactly. And Szeth is kind of elevated by Nail during this time, and we see eventually some of the moments when Szeth is training with Nail. So it's kind of all on the back of little Edge Dancer Lift.
During Oathbringer, we see Lift using her weird Lift abilities to kind of hijack the Stormfather's visions. She's able to pop in without being specifically invited or brought in by the Stormfather.
We don't know what this is about other than the claim that Odium makes that this is a violation done by cultivation, that there's, something she wasn't supposed to do that she is doing with Lift. And it's certainly beyond just an Edge Dancer ability. We don't think that is really part of this equation. We do think it's something like what cultivation did with Dalinar and Taravangian.
Well, we hear that Lift exists partially in the cognitive realm. I'm assuming that would be the thing that would allow her to slip into visions.
That makes sense to me. I just don't know why that would happen or what it means for a non-cognitive shadow to live partially in the cognitive realm. And I think that the other interesting thing that we are going to learn about Lift, especially after Rhythm of War, when we can really put these concepts into a clear view, is her processing of food, caloric intake into light. And questionable, does that light have to be stormlight? Is it life light? Could it maybe be other lights? I'm wondering if she might be another example of like things merging in a specific way.
I don't think we've seen that yet.
No, definitely haven't seen it. I'm just wondering like what is going on with Lift's light abilities.
Of course. Also in Oathbringer, during the Battle of Thaylen Field, Lift and Szeth work together to steal back the King's Drop. She leads the Fused on a grand chase with a fake King's Drop ruby. Lift also prevents Nightblood from eating Szeth's soul, but barely. She struggles, but she does do it. They are both saved from Nightblood when Dalinar opens Honor's Perpendicularity.
Lift is going to come up to Dalinar while he is attempting to imprison the Thrill, giving him the actual King's Drop that will then successfully be imprisoned by Dalinar. We know eventually that King's Drop is going to get dropped into a very deep part of the ocean.
There's something really sweet about this picture of this little girl kind of accompanying and encouraging Dalinar as he is facing this terrible thing.
Oh, absolutely. And she actually starts the battle with him too.
Yeah.
When he has the book and he's just like standing in the hole of the wall.
And she's like, weird weapon, man.
Yeah. And he's like, do you have one? And she says, no, never learned to read.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, a sword. And then she pulls out like the spren stick.
Yeah,
it won't turn into a blade.
Baton, sort of.
Good stuff from Lift. The battle at Thaylen Field ends. Lift is going to take up residence in Urithiru. And another year, of course, is going to go by in the gap. And this is going to start bringing up all of the problems for Lift, maybe facing the reality that Dalinar had to face in Oathbringer, a kind of like acknowledgement that what happened in her past is not what she thinks it is.
In terms of the Night Watcher.
In terms of the Night Watcher, in terms of like, does she start getting hints that cultivation was doing the thing, but mainly that she asked the Night Watcher not to change, and she is definitely changing.
Yeah, she's getting more and more evidence that she is in fact growing up. She's getting taller, her body is changing, and
all those fun 13-year-old things are happening to her, and she is very, very confused why that is happening to her.
Yeah, and it kind of makes her feel further away from her mom, because she is no longer the girl that her mom knew. During Rhythm of War, some of the sort of notable moments from Lift are that she interrupts a fight between two AVR, and the AVR that she saves belonged to this man that she describes as a minor functionary. I don't really know what a functionary is, do you?
So a functionary is kind of like an ambassador, but not as important. Someone who's like in a diplomatic or like an important station normally, but they're part of an entourage, or they're just like, they're important, but they're not the main guy or the main gal type of thing. So she saves someone who seemingly is of importance, is how I would say.
Well,
that.
He's dead, but she saves his AVR.
Well, the AVR is the thing that I was talking about. I'd shifted to just caring about the animal. So sorry for that minor functionary, but
no, I think he's important though, because this minor functionary is described as wearing rings, and every time I hear about someone wearing a lot of rings, obviously I think they're a Farukamist. And then she also remembers this detail. I don't know what it means, but the other thing she remembers about him is that he was always visiting old people in the tower.
I don't have a great concept, but my only guess would be that if they are a world hopper, then they know a little bit more about the cognitive realm and maybe how to like transition. That's how they got from one planet to the other. But one thing we know about from Kelsier in Secret History is that not necessarily old, but mad people are more able to glimpse the cognitive realm, view the cognitive realm. So maybe he's trying to speak to people who are going mad, and that's why he's visiting. Literally, this is my only speculation.
Yeah, that's way out, but we have no other ideas. Unfortunately, the other AVR that was attacking this man's AVR belongs to Mraize, and Mraize finds her and imprisons her. He somehow knows that she is powered by lifelight. So like he already has some background info on Lift.
Yeah, I'm actually confused. Does Mraize have breath? I feel like there are some mentions of him being able to kind of like know when Shallan is approaching.
Oh, yes. He definitely has life sense.
Okay, so
yeah,
maybe this is more speculation. Let me know what you think about this one, because this is like a question that might actually be answered. And that's, does life sense coming from a heightening allow you to make distinctions between stormlight, voidlight, lifelight, all the different things?
Like inside someone's body?
I would say both inside someone's body and in something like a sphere or gemstone. And here's my only argument for why. It would be giving off some type of tone.
Well, in a gemstone, I think everyone can tell the difference. They have different colors.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Being able to like either see inside someone's body or like see their spirit web or something in some way, that seems like a different thing to me. Maybe if it is, like you're saying, giving off the different tone, like if Lift's lifelight is giving off cultivation's true tone, then that would probably, I would think of that more as a metallurgy, hearing the rhythms kind of power.
Yes, I totally see that as well. I would just question, like, how did he become a Mistborn? But we know that anybody can become...
Well, he wouldn't necessarily have to be a Mistborn. He would just need to be able to burn bronze.
Okay, so how does it become misting? Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I think that for me, breath just makes more sense because it's more transmutable.
He could have been a Scadrian to start with.
That is very true. And then he would have been a natural misting. He is working for Thydakar, so there's at least a connection there. Very, very great speculation. Let us know what you think. Is a heightening, the power of breath, able to make distinctions on what type of magic people are using? Or do you think that Mraize is maybe a secret misting? That would be such a fun reveal, too, if he was actually Scadrian. I would not expect that for some reason.
It would not be as surprising to me.
Totally awesome. Let us know what you think. Let's get back to Lift.
Yeah, this is not Mraize's story. At this point in the tower, Lift is able to use her regrowth, but she is not able to use the surge of abrasion, which is her awesomeness, her slickness.
Now, this is because of the tower's inversion and the blocking. So for some reason, we know in the tower, when it is blocking, adhesion for the Windrunners, for Kaladin, I will say, and Lift's regrowth still both work.
Yes.
Fun reasons why. Let's continue and get more information.
Lift is then rescued from imprisonment by Venli. She comes to heal Kaladin and Teft, and they implement a plan to wake up the other Radiants. So Lift and Teft go to get the other Radiants, but before Lift can begin waking them up with her regrowth power, she's ambushed by Vyre. Her legs are sliced with a shard blade. The poor girl continues to try to like drag herself over to the Radiants to wake them up, but she ends up getting captured and restrained. Later, we know by the end of the story, she is able to recover the use of her legs, presumably after she eats some food and is able to power up.
Yeah, I hope that she got some great pancakes for taking slice.
I think she eats Dalinar's lunch.
Well, at least it's on point. I want to make a hard transition to the other member of the buddy cop duo. We have Lift. Now let's get Szeth, Sun Villano, not quite truthless of Shinovar.
The beginning of Szeth's story, as far as we know at this point, pre-Wind and Truth, is that at some point in the past, Szeth became truthless, and was exiled from Shinovar. This seems to have something to do with him believing that Radiants are returning.
We are expecting to get a lot more information about
Yes.
Szeth's backstory in Wind and Truth. Many people might actually already have some of that information because you're reading the preview chapters. We are not doing that here, so we are hashtag almost all spoilers. For now, let's just say that Szeth becomes truthless. He is forced, in quotes, to follow the orders of whoever carries his oath stone and sold into slavery.
Flash forward, and we see Szeth being purchased as a slave by the Parshendi and tasked with murdering Gavilar. He is nice enough to leave Gavilar's final words for Dalinar, and he takes the anti-void light gemstone and hides it away somewhere.
Szeth's oath stone is seemingly no longer needed by the Parshendi and is passed off eventually, of course, getting that oath stone to Taravangian, who recognizes what Szeth did at Gavilar's feast and will use him to cause chaos and go on an assassination spree, which of course is setting up the destabilization between Way of Kings and Words of Radiance.
While he is trying to fulfill his assignment from Taravangian to kill Dalinar, Szeth battles with Kaladin a couple of times. He sees that Kaladin is a Radiant, which is really shocking and destabilizing to Szeth's entire worldview and his deeply held beliefs. One of these battles happens during the Everstorm. Kaladin and Szeth fight. Kaladin kills Szeth. Szeth is then revived by Nail, who uses some type of ancient fabrial that we don't know anything about. And then Szeth is given Nightblood. He now realizes that he's not truthless. He was never truthless and kind of has to deal with the consequences of his action.
Don't really know if he's doing that well or still has processed what has really happened, but we do want to call out this moment, the moment of his, in quotes, death, because it is remarked by Brandon as distinctly different from something like the other cognitive shadows that we see.
Yeah.
Szeth is not like a herald. Szeth is not like Vasher, a true Type 2 invested entity, but he did seemingly suffer some type of consequence from his death. His stuff's not all aligned properly. So after this moment, he has that kind of ghostly image or after image that occurs when he is moving around through the world. But at this point, he's a unique thing. We don't really know how to classify him. And perhaps the most unique thing is that he is holding Nightblood and becomes kind of the black and white assassin.
Ooh, love it. The Oreo assassin.
That is genius. The Oreo assassin is actually who I'm going to go as for every Halloween and Dragonsteel from here on out.
Perfect. After this, Szeth accompanies Nail for a while. They go to Yada, where Szeth encounters Lift for the first time. He's also exposed to Nail's flaws as he continues to spend more time with the Herald. Eventually, he goes to the Skybreaker base, which is near the Pure Lake, and he accomplishes the first couple of challenges to make him officially a Skybreaker. His second ideal is, quote, I swear to seek justice, to let it guide me until I find a more perfect ideal, end quote.
The Skybreakers have certainly kind of gotten a lot of screen time and mentions. We're, following Szeth as early as the book begins, technically.
Well, he's not a Skybreaker then, though.
He's not, but he has the powers of the Honor Blade, and it is just following this story. It's kind of fitting that Wind and Truth is going to end and focus on Szeth's story, as he is one of the major catalysts of all of the events that play out for the Stormlight Archive.
Absolutely.
Let's jump forward to the battle at Thalen Field, and it's here that Szeth and Nail arrive. They're flying over the battlefield discussing the reality that to us as readers has just been revealed about the Eliasteel and the humans being the invaders. Nail is talking about how he's going to take the Skybreakers to join the Singers and join Odium. And he says to Szeth that it is now time for you to make a decision. Another leveling of your ideals requires putting your faith and trust in
the law.
Yeah. And then that is defined differently for different Skybreakers.
Yeah. Szeth ends up swearing his third ideal to a person instead of like a written law or idea, and he swears to Dalinar Kholin. He also sets his next goal, that his fourth ideal mission is going to be cleansing Shinovar of its false leaders.
Interestingly, I actually thought the mission statement was a fifth ideal thing, but
no, the fifth ideal is you must become the law.
Right. It's so intense.
It's really intense.
I thought that those two things were the same. I have a mission to practice the law or, somehow become the law. But this very distinct, I'm going to go on a mission and cleanse Shinovar.
Yeah.
To me is it's a very unique thing. The Skybreakers they're
weirdos.
They're weirdos, but at least I respect their hierarchy. You do the challenges, XYZ, you get the thing, you attract the spren.
It's very clear.
Yeah, you set up a mission, you accomplish the mission, you get fourth ideal, you become the law, you get fifth ideal. It's it's all very stated. Nail is also not lying about anything. He's not
seemingly.
Seemingly, of course, but he is upfront with the information that he has, even though he's kind of mad and doesn't have a great memory of things.
Yeah. A cool, kind of interesting thing as they have this conversation, Nail doesn't really seem to have any hard feelings towards Szeth for going his own way and picking, the opposing side in this battle. He's like, hey, if we meet on the battlefield, then we'll fight. But also, I'll be back to mentor you. I'll teach you your next surge. So either I'll kill you or I'll be your teacher, and kind of both.
Yes, and it's this concept that Nail brings forward of you might have made the wrong decision, Szeth, in swearing your ideal to Dalinar because people are flawed.
Yeah.
But he also turns that back on himself. And he says, most especially me, and recognizes the deep thing that is wrong within him.
There's a few times that he acknowledges to Szeth his own shortcomings, which I do really admire. I know Nail is kind of a problematic, scary character in a lot of the Stormlight Archive, but I think these two things, the fact that he is able to kind of amicably disagree with someone and the fact that he's very willing to acknowledge his own shortcomings really endear him to me.
Endear's a very strong word, and I'm also a little bit worried for our relationship if that's what attracts you. But it's okay, because what we see next are some of the most, I'm going to curse here, badass displays of power anywhere in the Cosmere. This is Szeth, the third ideal Radiant, using Nightblood. He takes down a Thunderclass. He is laying waste to people across Thalen Field, but it is when the thrill surges and Dalinar is having his moment that Szeth is truly almost incapacitated by the power of the thrill.
Because of his past and his really intense PTSD and trauma, the thrill is way too much for him to handle. So this is why Lift ends up being the one to deliver the gemstone. Szeth's like, I'm out, you take this, I gotta go. Of course, Szeth is later imprisoned in Urithiru, but he is let out of prison to go on the expedition with Dalinar to Emul. He is brought as Dalinar's guard, but he is undercover with a light weaving.
During this mission to Emul, Szeth confides in Dalinar that he's convinced Taravangian is setting up a betrayal. He, knows how Taravangian operates and is warning Dalinar about this. We know this is true. Of course, everybody knows this is true, including Dalinar. I don't think it's a big mystery.
Yes. Yeah. Dalinar ends up arresting Taravangian. But Szeth goes and he has a conversation with Taravangian while Taravangian is imprisoned, and Taravangian tells him to give Nightblood to Dalinar because Odium is afraid of Nightblood, and so he thinks that it will be a useful weapon for Dalinar to have in this conflict with Odium. But Szeth is just so wary of Taravangian's manipulation. He thinks that this must be another manipulation, and so he refuses to do this.
I'm very worried that this is like an in-game potential. Obviously, I don't want anybody to have Nightblood. I want Nightblood to be dropped into the deep ocean parts too.
Oh.
But you're sad for the Nightblood?
Well, Nightblood's just being Nightblood, you know?
Yes.
He didn't ask to be born.
He didn't ask to be born, and neither did the Thrill, I am guessing.
Well,
but
yeah,
they both
fair enough.
reside down at the bottom of the
Fair
ocean. I'm very worried about something like Nightblood in the hands of Dalinar. So respect on Szeth on resisting that temptation.
Szeth then accompanies Dalinar to meet Ishar. When Ishar tries to steal the Stormfather's bond from Dalinar, Szeth uses Nightblood to break that capital C connection and to close the perpendicularity. Then Nightblood also chips Ishar's honor blade.
That honor blade had resided in Shinovar. It was actually maybe the responsibility of Szeth's father.
Yes, it was in his father's possession.
Yes. And I'm wondering if they were like guardians, if he had a very like old family that was always having children that just like watched the honor blades, or maybe honor blades were passed down from generation to generation. So there are like, 9 families or whatever in Shinovar that each looked out for a specific honor blade. We don't know that. We think we're going to get a lot more in Wind and Truth, but it is after this conflict with Ashar that Szeth is resolved on killing Taravangian. He goes to where Taravangian is imprisoned and stabs Taravangian with a knife. But it is in that moment that Odium pulls Taravangian into a vision. This is a mistake for Odium because Taravangian is now kind of in between realms is probably the wrong word. But
he's outside of time.
Yes, but importantly, he's still connected and present where Szeth is standing with Nightblood in the physical realm. And then he's communicating with Odium in whatever space Odium has created for them. And during that time, Taravangian is able to pull Nightblood into that vision and stab and kill Rasa, the vessel that is holding or is
controlling.
Yeah, whatever word you want to use. The old vessel of Odium is sucked into Nightblood and eliminated. That power that is left, all the power of the shard, performs the maneuver that has been hinted at since Oathbringer and what Navani has been talking about with the Fabrials, a kind of vacuum pressure that sucks in the thing that is nearest to that power, and Taravangian ascends to become the Shard of Odium.
Szeth sees the body of Rasa and assumes that he has killed Taravangian. And then next up for our assassin in white is doing his mission, going to Shinovar.
Going to Shinovar with Kaladin, who is going to be serving not as the warrior. And so we get a new buddy cop duo, not with Lif this time, but with Kaladin. And I think those two are going to have some tension. I think they're going to have some problems.
Our two sad boy warriors that both interestingly have bondsmith fathers. I'm putting Dalinar as Kaladin's like father figure.
I was about to say like, wait, Lyran is
like,
a bondsmith? I didn't know. He's a third one. He bonded the Night Watcher the whole time. That's
no, his surrogate father.
Okay, surrogate father. Yeah. Like it. And you're saying that Szeth's surrogate father
had Ishar's honor blade,
which is the
bondsmith honor blade.
There, I totally get it. I thought somehow you were like Navani is his. No, okay, this is perfect. This is perfect. Yes, he definitely has that relationship to the bondsmith blade.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna end on kind of a high note with lots of people's favorite character, Mr. Adolin Kholin.
We could not let you go out on a bummer of a note. We want to end it with the good boy energy, the golden retriever vibes. Adolin, I guess technically it would be like golden with black flecks.
Yeah.
But those vibes are all about us. Let's talk about Adolin. He is born right on the day that his father is ordered by Gavilar to resume the border skirmishes and like putting down the border skirmishes. And so he is going to, for his entire life, have that absentee father, but it allows him to form a very close bond with Evie, his mother.
Yeah, those really formative years are shaped by his rear-end mother.
He is going to be noted throughout his entire life to have more of those rear-end sensibilities, a little bit more open to physical and emotional expression. And we think that that's going to come in a lot of handy when he eventually marries Shallan, where you have to be open to a lot of new experiences / personalities.
While he's young, his mother speaks very highly of his father, even while Dalinar is not there, and she encourages Adolin to be a proper Alethi high prince. When Adolin is a young child, like 4 to 6 years old-ish, Evie and her 2 sons, Adolin and Rosharan, join Dalinar on campaign, where Adolin continues to learn battle tactics and fighting, and then he starts to spend half the year in Kholinar, where he gets educated in sort of those more courtly matters.
As we mentioned during Dalinar's chronological episode, I think these are actually good times for both Dalinar and Adolin. They seem to have the only like positive memories about each other during these periods, this like 6 months of the year. Well, not 5 months of the year on Roshar. And it seems that both of them kind of remember this time fondly. It's going to, of course, become a core memory of Adolin, the soldier, the desire to prove himself to his father, and that's going to continually motivate him until his teenage years.
Adolin is about 17 when Dalinar reaches his rock bottom following the destruction at the Rift. At this point, Adolin seems to be quite an eager and responsible young man. He seems to still idolize his father, and he certainly takes Rosharan, his younger brother, under his wing.
I think there's lots to be said about this relationship and this time period for Adolin and Dalinar's relationship. I am very saddened by the knowledge that Adolin has to like rewrite a large part of this history, because remember, at this time, everybody thinks that Dalinar is struggling so much because the story is that Evie was assassinated,
right,
and then in a rage he destroyed Rathalas. And so it's like 2 different terrible things, but it was quote unquote justified actions. And Adolin is like giving all the benefit of the doubt to his father. And now when we meet him in the present, he's still processing those feelings. I hope that there is more to see from Adolin in that regards, and how he kind of like starts to separate himself from his father in Rhythm of War.
Right.
But let's get through.
Yeah, we're not there yet.
Oh, of course. Yeah. This is kind of the start of Way of Kings, though, is like that's the vibe that we have going into Way of Kings.
Yeah.
Adolin has gotten a little bit older, a little bit more important. Maybe some of those high prince benefits have started to kick in because he's a ladies' man. Adolin is introduced as a Casanova, just all around the war camps when we meet him. He definitely doesn't do this in, I would say, like a negative sense. He's not playing with women's hearts purposefully. Yeah. He is kind of disconnected from a lot of these pursuits, which is maybe the biggest criticism. Like he's not emotionally invested enough. And so like, that's never good when you're in a relationship. But overall, he's kind of floating from person to person and not being committed or not getting connected to any one individual. This attitude, I think, is also reflected in his military position. He's known as being an honorable soldier and a good secondary commander, kind of like a lieutenant for his father. He's one of their primary shard bearers, and it's always remarked how they like jump over the chasms first and then like fight for the bridges to be laid down. And at the same time, what he actually wants to pursue are the duels that he is forbidden. And so I just kind of see this kind of like he's not able to fit where he wants to be, and that leads him to kind of float in this time period of his life.
Yeah. During this time, he also worries that his father is either going mad or just losing his edge. He initially thinks that he wants Dalinar to step down as High Prince, but he's later convinced to support Dalinar, and he starts to see the wisdom of the teachings of the book, the in-world book, The Way of Kings, and the Alethi Codes of War. As you said, Adolin is a master duelist. That's his true passion. And we see him talking to his shard blade before all of his bouts. And he is one of the only shard bearers who refuses to name his shard blade because he says he assumes that the blade already has a name, that its original owner gave it, and he doesn't know the correct name for his blade.
We're going to see that come into play, his dueling prowess come into play during Words of Radiance. After the events of the Battle of the Tower, Adolin has, even before the events, but he always has this kind of like deep dislike and distrust of Sadeas. We know that after the Battle of the Tower, he never forgives Sadeas for that. And Adolin is going to assassinate Sadeas when they make it to Urithiru. And it will set up a interesting period during Oathbringer where he is investigating the murder that he committed.
Yeah. He feels kind of ashamed of this action, but he also feels like he did the thing that needed to be done. So he has these conflicting emotions about this specific event in his life.
Yeah, once again, kind of conflicting emotions causing a little bit of dissociation. He doesn't know his place.
Yeah, I think this is kind of a way that he and Shallan are similar and maybe something that they connect on.
Agreed.
I think Adolin also doesn't neatly fit into any of the boxes that are presented in their society. He is not fully aligned with his father, but he agrees with a lot of what his father does and says and thinks. And, you know, he is a high prince, but he doesn't fully want that role. He turns down the opportunity to become king of Alethkar. So yeah, he's finding his own way.
Yes, I think that's important for our favorite, not Radiant, a path that he is kind of making through the wilds on his own.
That's a great point. He also doesn't fit into the box of Knight Radiant, but he also is more than a regular person. Yeah,
and we're going to see that bond that he has with what we know eventually is going to be the blade named Maya. And Maya and his relationship is seen as the gang gets stuck in Shadesmar after the events of Kholinar and the destruction there.
Yes, he goes on this expedition to Kholinar. During that time, he and Shallan become closer. He even confesses that he murdered Sadeas. He meets Maya for the first time, and they learn what Deadeyes are. And then while they're in Shadesmar, Adolin suffers a gut wound while fighting the Fused. And he only survives that encounter because his Deadeye, Maya, attacks the Fused and allows him to escape from that encounter.
Yeah, it's certainly not the last unique thing that we're going to see from Maya, but it is pointing us to the reality that the Deadeye Spren are far more knowledgeable, cognizant than...
Or can be. I don't know if they all are.
Not necessarily that they all are, but they can be. And
there's
I think
something, special about Maya.
They can be, I believe, in part because Adolin is doing that reaching out that the Spren normally do in reverse. Think about how it's described when the Spren are bonding a Radiant. They come finding the Radiant. They are attracted to the Radiant. But in this circumstance, I'm guessing a Deadeye can't do that. They're, limited or not able to. And so there's only one bond that they have, and how that person treats them is all that they're going to get. Adolin reaches out to Maya and tries to understand his blade as a entity. And I think that connection he is trying to form heals Maya in a way enough that she is able to take this step. And then as we move past Oathbringer into Rhythm of War, we're obviously going to see more from that relationship as well.
During the Battle of Thaylen Field, Adolin is a little out of place again because now he's in this world of Knights Radiant and he is not a Knights Radiant. So he's not given a specific assignment during this battle by Dalinar. Dalinar assigns all of his Knights Radiant, something important to do in the battle. And Adolin just has to take it upon himself to figure out what needs to be done and try to help in the ways that he can.
Yeah, for the first time in their life, Rosharan pushes aside Adolin in a battle. It's almost the reverse of what happened. I think it was in Way of Kings when they're going after the
Thunder.
Great Shell, and you have Rosharan like running up behind. He's like, "Dad, can I help in any way?" And everybody's like, "Go back, run away. You don't belong here." And now it's Adolin who's receiving that same thing this time from Rosharan.
But yet, Adolin takes it upon himself to try to help fight the Thunderclasts, even despite the fact that he is not wearing his shard plate at this point. This is a very noble idea, but not a great idea. He is basically just immediately totally messed up by this Thunderclast, but he keeps trying, which is true bravery. During this battle, he finds that he's able to mentally communicate with Maya, and she, for the first time, is able to communicate back to him, telling him her name.
This connection kind of gives him the confidence and maybe the recognition that he just broke his whole body. He gives up Maya to one of the Thaylen generals who's wearing shard plate, and he is going to continually try to help behind the front lines as the Battle of Thaylen Field continues to play out.
At the end of Oathbringer, he tries to release Shallan from their betrothal, but Shallan fully commits to him, and then they are married. Adolin is off the market, ladies.
Unless you're one of Shallan's personalities, and then strangely, he's back on the market for you. I don't know how their life works. I don't want to speak on it. However, what we do know is that Rhythm of War, primarily Adolin's role is going to be this expedition to lasting integrity. We know it's started in large part because of Shallan. She is sent or motivated to go there by the Ghostbloods, but it is essential.
Well, yes, she goes because of the Ghostbloods, but Dalinar assigns them to go as well because they're trying to find more honor spren to bond to get more Windrunners.
Exactly. They have capped out, and who better to represent humanity on this mission than Adolin Kholin.
So true. Adolin's like, okay, this is something that I can do. He is feeling a little bit insecure about his place in this new world of Radiance. He is also dealing with now being a Bright Lord, now that his father has, stepped out of that role and taken over Urithiru. And of course, he's dealing with the fallout of his father's confessions in the in-world book, Oathbringer. And so going on this expedition is kind of a way for Adolin to, one, get away from all of that and kind of process some of the thoughts and feelings that he's having. But he also says multiple times that this is a way for him to feel useful, that this is something that he can do that not everyone can do. He has the sort of diplomatic and political education to fill this role.
So it's an excellent opportunity for Adolin, and when they are transitioning through Shadesmar, there are some of our greatest glimpses into the different Sprens and Spren societies. And one thing that we hear kind of over and over is that Deadeyes are not valued by other Spren in the same way that Adolin values Maya. They are scoffed at. The relationship is scoffed at. And he even has Spren who are telling him, Deadeyes don't understand any words.
Yeah, over and over again, Spren come up to him and are like, what are you doing? Why are you being so nice to your Deadeye? Like, there's no point in treating her like this. She can't understand. Like, it doesn't matter to her. You're being so silly, basically. But Adolin just kind of puts his head down and continues to treat Maya as a full person, as he believes she should be treated.
Always a good decision. Even if you're not 100% certain, just make the decision anyways.
On the reread, it's honestly pretty shocking the way that like Maya's own kind, other Spren, are so dismissive and so mean to her, like right in front of her. Just over and over again, her own people come up and say that she's worthless, basically, and that she shouldn't be treated well.
Yeah, I think, to speculate, I would think that it is a little bit like how the Parshmen were treated by humans. And if eventually the humans are told, hey, those Parshmen were actually being like purposefully mentally suppressed and trapped in their own minds, and they're fully functional human beings, the humans might do a lot of self-sabotage to convince themselves their behavior was appropriate, that it was like, it was always justified how we treated them. I'm guessing that the Spren are not treating the Deadeyes great, and they've formed these mental concepts about the Deadeyes, and then because of their Spren, they can't change quickly, and that's kind of like locked them into this really negative mindset about the Deadeyes.
Yeah, there's just such a clear contrast between the way that she's treated by like her own people versus the way that Adolin treats her. And this whole storyline is about how dangerous humans are and about how humans will only hurt Spren. And yet Maya is such a clear example of the exact opposite.
And to speculate just a little bit further, because making the connection to what's going to happen in our timeline here, Maya represents a generation of Spren that all made the same decision at the same time. And all the other Spren were either not around or didn't make that decision because they weren't involved in it.
Yeah.
And so all the Spren we see are the descendants or the people who existed and didn't understand or comprehend, could not understand or comprehend the decision made by the Radiant Spren. And so they could make up whatever story they wanted. But like they're the survivors or the leftovers after the recreants from the Spren society. And so like that might be the only way they can process things, is just like the humans killed them. They're bad. We have to believe that in any way to process this great trauma. I mean, they talk about like the Spren civilizations kind of being hugely weakened depending on the Spren type.
Yeah. And we hear all of these arguments made as the group is traveling through Shadesmar. One of the first Spren to kind of impress this upon them is Nodum, who we encounter again. This was an honor Spren ship captain that helped the humans on their previous journey through Shadesmar. We learn that Nodum has been exiled from the honor Spren homeland as punishment for helping them specifically. And then they're kind of following behind Nodum as they are making their way towards lasting integrity, which is the honor Spren kingdom.
Yeah, the capital.
Yeah, capital. And on this journey, they are pursued by this caravan of Tukari people, humans. Just as a reminder, Tukar is the country that is currently under the rule of Ishar, which may explain why these Tukari are a little sketch. And they end up attacking Nodum really brutally. Adolin goes to Nodum's rescue. It's a super dramatic scene where he is fighting very disadvantaged. Maya comes to help him fight.
This is going to be called out by Nodum after the battle is over, because he too is surprised that Maya was able to react that way. He asks Adolin, how did you train her to do that? And seeing this relationship between Maya and Adolin, I believe, is one of the things that convinces Nodum to eventually support them down the line. I mean, he already did support the humans in the past, so he was already kind of like in my favor.
Sort of, yeah.
Sort of course.
For an honor Spren, yes. So their group arrives at lasting integrity. They bring Nodum with them because he's been injured, and they're immediately refused entry. The honor Spren absolutely refuse to hear anything that the humans have to say. They completely reject the idea of bonding more humans, and in a last-ditch effort, Adolin offers himself up for judgment. He says, you know, if you're going to hold humans accountable for the actions of our ancient ancestors and this decision that we had absolutely nothing to do with, then you're going to have to prove it in a court of law and prove that I am guilty of this action.
Exactly. It's just like, if you're calling us guilty, then here I am to be.
Prove it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he puts himself forward in this instance. The honor Spren accept because they are bad spren, and they are knowingly bringing him into imprison. They're going to put on this, fake trial that's always trying to get to the result that they want, and they are presupposing. And we see another spren, an ink spren this time, who is named Blended, living in lasting integrity, and is going to instruct Adolin and the group on the legal matters for the court. But they also say up front, like, this is a sham. You're not going to get out of here.
Yeah.
But here's how you go through the process that these honor spren have set up for you.
And they're waiting for the arrival of the High Judge. So they've got a few days for Blended to kind of walk Adolin through how law works in lasting integrity. When the High Judge finally arrives, it is revealed to be none other than Kalek the Herald.
This is Ristaris, who Shallan has been sent to kill. So that subplot is what we talked about in our Shallan Devar Chronologically episode. So the trial, let's get into it. The peak, and once again, a kind of like interesting thing that we see with Rhythm of War from Navani's perspective and Adolin and this group's, is that the Sanders Avalanche is happening in the quote-unquote most boring of environments. We have the study and scholarly research happening with Navani and Rabaniel, and over here we have a legal drama that's being set up, and these are the peaks of the fantasy realm that we want. I mean, this is as good as it gets, people. Let's go over this courtroom drama that's playing out here.
During the trial, the Spren established that since no one disputes that the recreance happens, the Spren only need to prove that it is wise to stay away from humans. Some of the arguments against Adolin include witnesses emphasizing that the danger of the Stormfather being bonded, and they ask this question of like, what would happen if Dalinar broke his bond and the Stormfather was killed? That would be catastrophic. It's, way too big of a risk for any of us to take, and this is evidence that the bond is bad, basically.
Now, before we go on, I actually agree with this point. This is a scary point that nobody has the answer to.
Sure.
What happens to the Stormfather and to Roshar if Dalinar breaks his bond? I want you, the listener, to give me some of your feedback on this. Let's say, for any reason you can imagine, Dalinar breaks the bond with the Stormfather. What are the ramifications of that? And keep in mind that Dalinar is something unique and extra powerful for the first time because of this part of honor that is within the Stormfather. So hit me with your speculation on that front as well.
Blended argues that it's unnatural for Spren and humans to bond because humans are not native to Roshar. She actually suggests that they should side with Odium, and she asks Adolin if he can guarantee that no humans will break their bonds in the future, which of course he can't.
Show trial. Sham. The legal counsel
Yeah.
for Adolin goes over and is a witness for the other side, and then just says, you know what, we should actually join Odium. It's not even stay out of... Oh, goodness. Honor Spren not being honorable is what we are witnessing
Well,
here.
Blended is an Spren.
Oh, Blended was all part of this. This whole thing was set up, and she's just like, yeah, I'm here to help you, Adolin. No, she was always there to testify against him. She knew what she was going to do.
I think she was upfront about it.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
So
The third witness is Nodum, who has been reinstated as a captain.
Bribed.
AKA, bribed.
he's been bribed as a captain. If you can't tell, I'm upset with these honor
You're
Spren.
really upset. Nodum starts out by reading a prepared statement, but eventually he abandons that and he tells the truth, declaring that honor is not dead so long as he lives in the hearts of men. This declaration causes an uproar in the court, and the court is cleared for the day.
From the beginning, I have been waiting for this moment. Honor is not dead as long as he lives in the hearts of men. Way back, many episodes ago, I told everyone that I was excited about this question. Do honor spren create honor? Do wind spren create the wind? And here we have the necessary loophole. The key piece of information that we get from Nodum is that there's a possibility. I don't know if it's true. This is just, taking Nodum at his word. But if honor is not dead, as long as he lives in the hearts of men, then there's the chance that honor can be reborn, remade. reformed in some respect. If Windspren can create wind, then maybe humans can create some honor. Oh man, I love the speculation. Thank you so much for staying with me. However, it's not a good day. It is a better day for Adolin.
On the second day?
Yeah.
Kind of.
But it's still not great.
Yeah, it's his day to speak on his own behalf, and he does make some decent arguments, but understandably, he kind of trips up on Honor Spren legal technicalities. The court is a lot more unruly on this second day, and finally Adolin is presented with a recently killed Deadeye cryptic. He just happened to encounter this specific Deadeye earlier in their trip through Shadesmar, and the Spren is used as proof that these broken bonds are not a thing of the past, but they are happening. They've happened in recent years.
This all looks very bad for Adolin, and he and Shallan have a moment to discuss the trial and how much they have grown together and love each other, and their relationship does seem to be at a great point.
Yeah.
Right as Adolin seemingly is going to be imprisoned forever by the Honor Spren.
Yeah. The following day at the trial, this is the day that the judgment is going to be dispensed, and Adolin arrives to find that Kalek has been replaced by the Honor Spren leader Sekir as the judge due to what they're calling interference from Shallan in the trial. Sekir brings Maya to the stand and gives this scathing indictment of Adolin, which is what Sekir says on behalf of Maya. He's kind of like, Maya can't speak for herself, so I'm going to say what she would say, and says a bunch of really mean stuff about Adolin.
And if you were wondering, fellas, this is not a great thing to do. Just be like, don't talk, ladies. I'll say it on your behalf. Maya gets a little annoyed at this, and then she's going beyond annoyed. She is visibly like vibrating and struggling.
Yeah, she's like growling and moaning and is trying to communicate her distress. And Adolin, through their bond, Adolin can feel her anxiety and her anger and her disagreement with what Sekir is saying on her behalf.
And there is, we believe, a kind of passing of strength.
Yeah, there's a moment.
Connection, through their connection, there is something that Adolin seemingly gives to Maya that she needs, that elevates her enough to be able to speak for the first time.
As she is struggling, she kind of runs out of energy and becomes very weak. And Adolin kind of thinks telepathically toward her, like, here, take some of my strength, and sends it to her, which gives her the power to stand up and to speak, actually, and talk about how the old Radiants and the Spren decided together to break the bond, and that it was a sacrifice that they chose, and gives this revelation about the occurrence of the Recreants that no one has ever heard before. And so, of course, the case against Adolin is dismissed.
We still don't have a great idea what this means or how it impacted the Recreants, or it will impact the other Radiants or the Radiant classes. We just witnessed so much antagonism and anger and kind of like generational trauma from the Spren towards the humans on this expedition. And, people mistreating Maya, as we talked about, like mistreating the Deadeyes. There's so much wrapped into this, and the revelation that Maya chose, that the Radiant Spren at the time chose to give up in this way, means something valuable to our Radiants. I just don't know what it's going to be. I am thinking it might be in Wind and Truth, but this could also be something that's pushed out further as well. I don't know if all of these things will be answered in the next book.
I think that the Recreants is going to be like pretty well wrapped up by the end of the first 5 books. That's my guess. I could be wrong, but that's kind of what I think. And we hear some of these questions from Blended, who after the trial says that she sees that there is a bond between Maya and Adolin, even though it's not a Radiant bond. And Blended says that even after this revelation, her opinion hasn't necessarily changed, because she's still really concerned about the reason why so many of these historical Spren would have chosen death rather than continuing with their bond.
Yeah.
She has a big question about why that decision would have been made if it was a conscious decision that they made. And I think that is a question that kind of all of us have, is like, okay, that kind of answers one thing, but as so often is the case in the Stormlight Archive, answering one question just begs more questions.
Exactly. I don't think Blended is wrong to ask that question, because there are many arguments that could make us choose different paths. For example, what if they chose to die because they thought that the bond itself was too dangerous? And so they were trying to sever and end Radiance altogether for that reason. And now we're bringing Radiance back. Maybe that reintroduces the danger. We don't know. So it's all speculation.
Yeah.
But we do know that this has been proven and kind of demonstrated that Adolin and Maya are uniquely bound together.
Yes. Not a radiant bond, but some other different type of bond exists between them.
As a reminder, Maya is known to be a cultivation spren, which means she would be part of the Edge Dancer Radiant Order.
Yes. And I think throughout my reread of Rhythm of War, I'm certainly seeing all of these moments where Adolin is really embodying the ideals of Edge Dancers. I'm so curious to see where this goes and how their relationship develops in this new path that they are forging. At the end of Rhythm of War, we see Adolin and Shallan agreeing to work together to help rehabilitate their Deadeyes. Adolin obviously has already made a lot of progress with Maya, and he's going to help Shallan work with Testament, and that whole journey is going to be a very fascinating story to watch unfold.
I'm incredibly excited about it. We know that the Honor Spren were not 100% left with, and now we're going to go join the humans.
Right.
And so that problem that Adolin was sent to Lasting Integrity to fix has not been solved. But with this promise about working on the Deadeye problem, I think there actually might be an answer in that.
Sure.
We know with 100% certainty that there are far more shard blades left at the Recreants than exist and are known to exist throughout Roshar.
And we see all of the Deadeyes in Shadesmar. We also know that there is a huge proportion of Honor Spren Deadeyes, because almost the entirety of the Honor Spren race were bonded at the time of the Recreants.
So we might not get those Spren who are in Lasting Integrity if Adolin can find a way to forge a bond with the currently Deadeye, but who's stronger to bring to the battlefield than the ancient Spren who would have been the ones with the most battle experience. Like, they are actually the people you want instead of the lost daughter of Sil. Like, she had never bonded, or she had bonded one other human.
Yeah, but he was mostly a non-combatant.
Exactly. So you would have to imagine that just like the Fused have been born and reborn and experienced and grown with that experience over time, there are Spren like that who are currently Deadeyes, who would have had thousands of years of experience fighting. Yes. And different bonds with different Radiants. So like, if Adolin can unlock that particular situation, and we know that Shallan likely will be traveling with Adolin while she is trying to learn about Ba-Ado Mishram, so that might be an aspect of the Deadeyes as well. This has all been excellent speculation, and we know that there were so many different characters, and we kind of went through a lot of stuff very quickly. But this is it, folks. This is the final couple of weeks before Wind and Truth come out. We're going to have maybe 2 more episodes, maybe some special stuff will drop, but we are incredibly excited and enthusiastic about the release. These timeline episodes have certainly helped me a lot, have made me very aware of all the different subtleties that have been building up throughout the first 4 books.
Yeah, this series has been really helpful for me in preparing for this next book. It's only a few weeks away now. So exciting.
Brooke, can you take us away?
Until next time, life before death.
Strength before weakness.
Journey before destination.